Imagine walking into a diner with just enough money for a simple meal, and then giving it all away to help someone else. That's exactly what happened to a kind-hearted homeless man who stumbled across a stranger in need. Little did he know, the stranger wasn't just anyone. He was a well-known philanthropist with the power to change lives. But here's the twist: instead of revealing who he was, the stranger chose to stay silent, observing the man's generosity unfold. As their brief encounter played out, the homeless man's selflessness sparked something profound, setting the stage for a chain of events no one could have predicted. Was this a simple act of kindness, or was fate about to reward him in ways he could never imagine? Stick around, because this story will leave you inspired, surprised, and maybe even a little teary-eyed. It was a cold evening, and the small diner on the corner had just started filling up with its usual mix of late shift workers, weary travelers, and people looking for a warm meal. Among them was the homeless man, his clothes worn and layered to keep out the biting chill. He had just enough change to cover the cheapest item on the menu, a bowl of soup. As he sat at the counter, quietly clutching the few coins in his hand, he overheard the sound of a quiet conversation nearby. A man, clean-cut but unassuming, was flipping through his wallet, his face etched with frustration. He explained to the cashier that he must have left his money at home. His tone was calm, but it was clear he was in a bind. The homeless man observed the scene from his seat, taking in every detail. He didn't know who this stranger was or why he didn't have any money. All he knew was that the man looked hungry and embarrassed. Without hesitation, he stood up, shuffled over to the counter, and placed his coins down. "Here," he said softly. "I don't have much, but it should be enough for something small." The stranger turned to him, surprised. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice laced with gratitude and hesitation. "I know," the man replied with a faint smile. "But everyone deserves a meal, right?" The cashier hesitated for a moment before nodding and ringing up the order. The stranger offered a heartfelt thank you, but the homeless man simply waved it off and returned to his seat, seemingly unaware of the magnitude of what he had just done. For him, it was a simple choice: help someone who needed it, just as he hoped someone might do for him someday. What he didn't realize was that this stranger wasn't just anyone. Known to millions as a philanthropist, this man had dedicated his life to helping others. He was accustomed to giving, not receiving. And this small, selfless act of kindness from someone who had nothing to spare hit him harder than any grand gesture ever could. For the first time in a long time, he found himself on the other side of generosity, and it left him deeply moved. The stranger, though grateful, couldn't shake the curiosity swirling in his mind. Who was this Moss? The minutes passed, the stranger couldn't hold back any longer. He approached the man's table, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from him. "Thank you again for what you did," he began. "Not many people would give what little they have to help someone else." The homeless man shrugged. "It's nothing, really. I've been in tough spots before, and I know what it's like to need a little help." They began to talk, and as the conversation unfolded, the stranger learned about the man's life, his struggles, his resilience, and the small moments of kindness that had kept him going. The homeless man, in turn, learned about the stranger's work, though the philanthropist avoided revealing too much about his identity. He didn't want to shift the focus away from the man's act of generosity. The conversation grew deeper, touching on themes of humanity, hardship, and hope. But just as the mood began to lighten, a group of rowdy diners entered the restaurant, their loud laughter cutting through the air. One of them, a man with a sharp suit and an even sharper tongue, spotted the homeless man and made a snide remark about how some people shouldn't be allowed in places like this. What had led him to this point? And how could someone with so little be so willing to give? Instead of leaving, he decided to sit at a nearby table and watch, waiting for the right moment to strike up a conversation. Meanwhile, the homeless man savored his modest bowl of soup, oblivious to the watchful eyes of the stranger. His thoughts drifted to memories of a life he used to have: a steady job, a warm home, a family. It had all unraveled so quickly, leaving him to navigate the harsh realities of life on the streets. Yet, despite everything he had lost, he had held on to one thing: his belief in the goodness of people. The atmosphere grew tense. The homeless man, used to such treatment, stayed quiet, his eyes fixed on the table. But the stranger, unable to tolerate the cruelty, spoke up. "You don't know anything about this man," he said firmly, his voice commanding attention. "He has more heart than most people I've met." The group fell silent, taken aback by his boldness. The sharp-suited man muttered something under his breath before walking away, but the tension lingered in the air. The homeless man looked at the stranger, a mix of gratitude and disbelief in his eyes. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," the stranger replied. "Kindness should never be met with disrespect." The moment passed, but it left a mark on both men. For the homeless man, it was a rare reminder that there were still people willing to stand up for him. For the stranger, it was a sign that he had made the right choice by staying to learn more about this remarkable individual. As the night wore on, the stranger knew he couldn't leave without doing something more. But he also knew that simply handing the man money wasn't the answer. He wanted to find a way to truly make a difference, to give this man the chance he deserved. The question was how to do it without undermining the very dignity and strength that had drawn him to the man in the first place. The two parted ways that night, but the stranger couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. He began making calls, reaching out to contacts, and formulating a plan, a way to repay the kindness he had been shown in a manner that could change the homeless man's life forever. Little did the homeless man know, his simple act of generosity had set something extraordinary in motion. But for now, his life continued as it always had, filled with uncertainty and struggle, yet guided by a quiet hope that things might one day get better. And though he had no idea what was coming, his heart remained open, ready for whatever life might throw his way. Over the next few days, the philanthropist couldn't shake the encounter at the diner. The homeless man's humility, strength, and selflessness had left a deep impression on him. He spent sleepless nights thinking about the man's words, his kindness, and his quiet resilience. It wasn't just the act of paying for a stranger's meal, it was the spirit behind it, the way the man had given without hesitation, despite having so little himself. The philanthropist decided he couldn't let it end there. He had made a career of helping others, but this felt different. This was personal. He began reaching out to people in his network, making calls, and brainstorming ways to help the man in a way that would truly make a difference. However, he knew it had to be done carefully. The man's dignity and pride were as integral to him as his kindness, and anything that felt like charity for charity's sake would risk offending or alienating him. The first step was finding him again. The philanthropist returned to the diner night after night, hoping the man might show up. On the third evening, just as he was beginning to lose hope, he spotted the familiar figure walking in, his head bowed slightly against the cold. The philanthropist felt a rush of relief and determination as he watched the man take his usual seat at the counter, ordering another modest meal with what little he had. This time, the philanthropist didn't hesitate. He walked over, greeted him warmly, and asked if he could join him. The man looked up, surprised but not displeased, and gestured for him to sit. They fell into conversation once again, and the philanthropist carefully guided the discussion toward the man's current situation, where he stayed, what he needed, and what his hopes for the future were. The man, though hesitant at first, opened up bit by bit, revealing that his biggest wish was simply to have a fresh start. A stable job, a roof over his head, and a chance to feel human again. Hearing this, the philanthropist felt his plan solidify in his mind. He explained that he worked with organizations that helped people in difficult situations and that he wanted to connect the man with some resources. The homeless man listened carefully, his brow furrowing slightly. He didn't want to be a burden, and he didn't want handouts. The philanthropist, sensing this, quickly added, "This isn't charity. It's an opportunity, a way for you to build the life you deserve. You've already shown you have the heart and the strength. Let me help you with the rest." After a long pause, the man nodded. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll give it a shot." Over the next few weeks, the philanthropist set everything into motion. He arranged for the man to stay in a transitional housing program that provided shelter and support while helping individuals get back on their feet. He also connected him with a career counselor who worked tirelessly to match the man's skills and experience with potential job opportunities. At first, the homeless man felt out of place. He wasn't used to being surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to help him, and there were moments when he questioned whether he belonged there. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks, he began to find his footing. He attended workshops, updated his resume, and even went on a few job interviews. With each small victory, his confidence grew. One day, he received a call from a local community center offering him a position as a maintenance worker. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work, and it came with the promise of a regular paycheck and benefits. When he shared the news with the philanthropist, the man's face lit up with pride. "You did this," the philanthropist said. "You earned it." With a job secured, the next step was finding permanent housing. The philanthropist worked behind the scenes to ensure the man had everything he needed to transition smoothly, from basic furniture to a small savings fund to cover initial expenses. When the man finally moved into his own modest apartment, he stood in the doorway for a long time, taking in the sight of the space that was now his. It wasn't much, but to him, it was everything. Word of the homeless man's journey began to spread, though he never sought attention or recognition. Local community members who had heard about his act of kindness at the diner started reaching out, offering support and encouragement. Some donated clothing and household items, while others simply stopped by to chat and offer friendship. For the first time in years, the man felt surrounded by a sense of belonging. Meanwhile, the philanthropist couldn't help but reflect on how much the encounter had changed him as well. Though he had spent years dedicating himself to helping others, this experience had reminded him of the power of individual acts of kindness. It had shown him that even the smallest gestures could ripple outward, creating waves of change that touched countless lives. One evening, the two men met again at the diner, sitting at the same counter where their story had begun. This time, they both ordered full meals, laughing and talking like old friends. The philanthropist couldn't resist asking, "When you gave me those coins that night, did you ever think it would lead to all of this?" The man shook his head, smiling. "No. I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." "That's what makes it so incredible," the philanthropist said. "You gave without expecting anything in return. And look where it's brought you." The man grew thoughtful. "I think it's a reminder that no matter how little we have, we always have something to give. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can change everything." As the two finished their meals and prepared to part ways, the philanthropist felt a deep sense of gratitude. This man, who had once been a stranger, had not only inspired him but had also reminded him of the humanity that connected them all. And though their paths had crossed by chance, it felt as though it had been meant to happen. The story didn't end there, of course. The homeless man, now no longer homeless, continued to rebuild his life, taking each day as it came. He began volunteering at the same shelter where he had once stayed, offering guidance and hope to others who were walking the path he had once been on. His story became a source of inspiration for many, proof that kindness and resilience could triumph even in the face of the greatest challenges. For the philanthropist, the experience became a defining moment in his work. He began focusing more on personal, one-on-one connections, seeking out those who might otherwise go unnoticed but whose potential was boundless. He often thought back to that night at the diner, grateful for the reminder that true wealth wasn't in what you had but in what you gave. And so, their story became a testament to the power of human connection, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark something extraordinary. It was proof that sometimes, all it took was a bowl of soup and an open heart to change two lives forever.